financial crisis recovery.
Foreclosure, short sales, bankruptcy, credit card debt, job loss, depreciating home values, money management. Peace of mind when it comes to your finances seems completely out of reach under current conditions, but there is a way to achieve it. For the next 60 minutes, you're going to find out how to cover your assets. Cover your assets.
Have strong opinions on both sides, and it sounds like you might have a strong opinion on one side of this. And where is the moral obligation to repay that debt? So your perception is, look, you should be willing to do that. Is that what you're saying, Jim?
Certainly, and because someone can, with the thought of, funding their 401k instead of making their mortgage payment, they could max out their payment just so they don't have any other money. Almost like not hiding their money, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. By any chance, Jim, are you in the banking industry?
No.
Oh, good. Okay.
I'm in the personal responsibility industry.
You are, huh? I hesitate to even ask what that is, but
well, you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, listen.
I think people, if they have a debt, they should pay their debt.
Well, I think you and I could sit down for a beer and discuss this into eternity. But listen, I don't argue with you that there's certainly a point to be made about moral responsibility, and where a person draws that line. I'm not going to try to be the moral authority. You may feel comfortable doing that. I certainly wouldn't. But
right. Well, it was just aggravating me that it seemed like the banks are the bad guys because they want their money.
Well, look, on the other hand, we can talk about the fact that there are differences in banking, because you've got big banks who are making big money on foreclosures, and you've got small banks who are not making big money on foreclosures and, in fact, are going out of business as a result of this debacle. So you got two very different perceptions. You got one group who's getting subsidies. You got another group who are not. You got one group who are buying distressed assets for pennies on the dollar when these poor small banks are going out of business, and hence why the banks treat these things very differently. And when, from my perspective as somebody who gives people advice and counsel on this stuff, I know immediately that if I'm dealing with Bank of America or Wells Fargo or some of the major banks, they've got a standard mode of operating, wherein if I'm dealing with a smaller bank, maybe a local bank, they've got an entirely different perspective, because they may have the bank examiners in, and they may have the very same type of pressure being put on them as a small bank as the consumer is in terms of trying to make that payment. So very different perspectives, and it's not all one-sided. And Jim, you bring up a great point, and I appreciate your perspective.
Okay, well, thanks for the discussion.
You're very welcome, Jim.
Bye.
So, there we hear it, Jason.
Mm-hmm.
There we hear it. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about how to position yourself for future financing and the implications of this. You see the moral and ethical dilemmas that are involved here. You can come down on either side of this. That's not my job to figure out where you should be, but my job is to give you the information, tell you how you'll go about doing whatever it is you want to do, and then how to recover afterwards. We're going to be talking about the recovery afterwards when we come back from our break. See you back at CYA 21, Cover Your Assets. All right, so we're back talking about strategic default. Strategic default going on in the market from the bank's perspective. Nearly 50% of all defaults, meaning people beginning to miss payments, are, from their perspective, strategic default. You heard a guy in the personal responsibility business who said, look, people need to pay their bills. And, you're always going to have both sides of that issue. And I don't have any problem with that, because you know what? I work for consumers. And when I work for consumers, I get paid to help them go to battle with the banks. On the other hand, when banks pay me as a consultant, and I have been paid more than once by banks as a consultant, I instantly can jump on their side of the table, see their perspective, and know how to pursue a consumer and how to get that money. And frankly, if you want help, I think the best people who can help you are people who know both sides of that street, because you're going to know how you're going to be pursued. You're going to know how you're going to be looked at if you're going to try to negotiate with the bank. On the other hand, if you know how to position people, you also know how to go after them. And so, knowing both of those is pretty important perspective. You're listening to Cover Your Assets. If you're interested in today's topic, and that is strategic default, beginning to miss payments in an effort to either try to negotiate a short sale, to get a loan modification, download the Financial Crisis Bible. You can find that by going to CYA21.com and downloading the Financial Crisis Bible. Give you a ton of free information, give you a little bit of perspective and a little expansion on today's topic. And if you'd like to schedule a consultation with me to try to get more informed information as it specifically relates to your situation, by all means, feel free to give us a call at 763-559-3800. So we're going to delve back into, let's assume that a person has decided to do this, they've gone through their process, and now they are on the other side. And frankly, you should begin to look at the other side. Jason, you had a couple gals in here today who help people find places to live. They manage properties, and they also screen tenants. So when a person is beginning to consider strategic default, I guess probably maybe the most important thing they need to consider is, if we're going to divest ourselves of our primary homestead and we're going to walk away, and that's always the question, to stay or to go in our primary homestead, they should immediately be thinking about how they'll be looked at and where they're going to live next, shouldn't they?
Absolutely. That's one of the first questions I ask when I sit down with folks that are in a position where they have to consider a short sale. My question is, where are you going to go? What's going to happen after we get the short sale done? What's the plan? When do you want to buy again? Most of them in the beginning will say no, and then at the end, that's the question: when can I buy again? So we need to have a plan of how do we get back and how do we recover from the situation.
And then most importantly, is that going to be a better situation, right? I mean, Go ahead.
People think that renting is just automatically a better deal, but you have to take into consideration all the benefits of owning. Your tax benefits, your principal buy down. What does it mean? Just because the rental payment is $200 less than what the current mortgage payment is, doesn't mean it's costing you less.
That's exactly right. And people do not, generally speaking, know how to make that. One thing I want to say that I think is really lost on folks who are considering strategic default. We have, if things have not changed, one of the top 2 or 3 rental markets in the country. Now, when I say that, I don't even think people know what I'm talking about. Here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that we have the top 2 toughest places in the United States to find a place to rent. When you step out into the rental world, what you're going to find out is that it is not dissimilar from the old days when real estate was really cooking and somebody would put the for sale sign out in the front lawn, and by the end of the afternoon they had 3 or 4 offers that were all qualified offers. That's what you're finding in rental today. So if you've got a property that is competitively priced in terms of rent, let me tell you what, you're going to have a line around the block. So when you go out there with your now, maybe for the first time in your life, beat up and damaged credit, you are going to find that it is a really, really tough time to try to find a place to rent.
It is. I've heard of guys that are landlords that have a bunch of properties. They'll do open houses for their rental, and they'll have literally multiple offers on that monthly rent. So what's that landlord going to look at? They're going to look at your credit, the financial situation, your history, and then you might even be in a position where you're bidding on a monthly rent just to get into a place.
It's shocking to most people that they are in that position. And the realities are simply this. You've got to consider where you're going to live next. You've got to consider the differences. When the gals were on today, and forgive me, the name of their company is, Jason?
Total Real Estate Success.
Total Real Estate Success. You'll notice that these gals are not out looking for tenants, because tenants are everywhere.
Right. Yep.
They're looking for more properties to manage, because they need more properties for the multitudes of renters who are coming at them. They don't need renters. They got all the renters they need. They need more properties for these renters. So you need to take that into consideration. And there are differences that they're talking about, which is habitual financial situations and people who are involved in what did they call it? They called it situational credit issues. They're going to be looked upon very differently. We're going to take our break. We're going to come back from the break. break, and we're going to wrap the show up. I want you to remember that you can take a class at Kaplan Professional Schools. Go to CYA21 and check out Kaplan Professional Schools. I am an instructor there. I teach a class called Strategic Default and the Path Back, which is coming up on June 25th. You can go with the professionals, the real estate agents, the financial advisors, the mortgage brokers, and the insurance agents that I teach on a weekly basis, or you can also go to the Fall and Rise class. These are classes that the public can attend, and you can get signed up for those classes with Kaplan Professional Schools. I think you'll find them to be enormously valuable if you're sitting there considering this decision. Let's go to break. We'll come back and we'll wrap up the show. All right, and we are back. Cover your assets. So, our show is all about how to minimize the damage through a financial crisis or ensure that you're never in one. We're talking today about strategic default, determining that I am so far underwater, it's never going to come back. Do I want to put forth my own assets to do this and, make those payments ongoingly, hoping the market will come back? Or are you of the opinion that I don't care if it takes, if in 10 years my property isn't going to come back, and if I'm going to divest myself of this property, the time is now to do it. And there is much to be said about that. It is an environment who has changed over time, meaning that 2 years ago, the environment to get rid of properties and minimize the damage was better than it is today. Having said that, as it changes and becomes more and more aggressive, today is a much better time than it will be 2 or 3 years from now. So if you say, well, I'm just going to stay in my house for the next 2-3 years, do you have this notion that real estate is going to come screaming back in the next 2 to 3 years and all of a sudden your home won't be underwater? I would suspect for most people, especially economists, they're going to believe that it's going to be a minimum of 7 to 10 years before our values even come close. And they may never to what we saw in 2006 for at least the next 10 to 20 years. So if you're in an upside down position at a time when the banks are still able to get subsidies and there's still money for them to justify why they will let you off the hook in terms of negotiations for 10, 20, 30, 40 cents on the dollar of an upside down position of $100,000, $200,000 negative equity in a home. Well, tell you what, guys, now is the time to do it if you're going to do it. And the longer you wait, the more aggressive it's going to be. I think it begs the question, when the subsidies go away and the big banks aren't making money on this, how long will it be before the banks take an altogether more aggressive posture and start to look at things differently, and then it's no longer possible? Go to our website, CYA21, download the Financial Crisis Bible. Hope you've enjoyed today's show, Strategic Default. If you want more information, by all means, you can contact me, Todd Rooker, at 763-559-3800. Download the Financial Crisis Bible. I think you'll find it to be enormously valuable. Thank you so much. Have a great week.